Shabbat Shalom, and thank you for inviting me into your home tonight. Let's talk for a few minutes together about our Torah portion, Bo, from the book of Exodus. So last week, in Egypt, enslaved, our people began to experience the plagues, which God, Moses, and Aaron were afflicting upon Pharaoh, Pharaoh's officers, and all of the Egyptians and the Israelites. And to what end? To free the Israelite people. But why did the Israelites have to experience all these plagues? Why didn't they just happen to the Egyptians? Well, it's highly probable that the Israelites were not prepared to leave. They'd been slaves for 400 years. It's 2015 now. Imagine 400 years ago, 1615, that our people, your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, going back so many generations that we can't possibly know the names of those people, that for all that time we have been slaves. We would be such different human beings. We wouldn't be able to look each other in the eye. We would be cowed all the time. We'd be terrified. We'd be so accustomed to someone saying, do this, and we would do it. The Israelites probably can't even listen to Moses. When Moses says to them, we're going to go free, they probably are terrified and don't want to hear him at all. But meanwhile, we know that Pharaoh's heart is hardened. Why does God do that? Why doesn't God just make Pharaoh free the people? Because in fact, at the beginning, Pharaoh's willing to do that. Perhaps because there's another group who need to be convinced, the Egyptians. So let's imagine. Last week's 7 plagues are described: blood, frogs, lice, bugs, cattle disease, boils, hail. Let's consider them. Blood. Every drop of water around you transforms into blood. You turn on the kitchen faucet, blood. You go and get ice from the refrigerator, blood cubes. You go and take a shower, blood. This is the most disgusting thing. I would have been convinced. But no. Frogs. Not just any frogs. You go into your kitchen, frogs are hopping everywhere, on the floor, on the counter, on the chairs. You open the cabinets, frogs jump out. You open up the refrigerator, frogs leap upon you. You go into your bedroom, you lift up your pillow, frogs, sheets, frogs, bathroom, everywhere you go. There are frogs, 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 frogs. I'm done. Take me out of Egypt. I'm ready to go. Still. Lice. Bugs. Cattle disease. Now this 5th plague, something changes. Moses says to all of the Egyptians, you can save your cattle. Just bring them inside and the cattle will be fine. So in fact, about half of the Egyptians, including Pharaoh's officers and courtiers, they all agree. They bring their cattle inside. And those that do, their cattle are unharmed. Now what a metaphor. First of all, it's a sign that half the Egyptians begin to be convinced that Moses and God are totally in control over Pharaoh. And by their taking some action, it's a sign that if they take action, something will change. So you would think this would be the moment where they would all rise up and maybe even overwhelm Pharaoh and say, even imprisoning Pharaoh, you can't do things anymore. We're in charge and we want to listen to God and let the Israelites go free. But nothing. And so the plagues continue. Boils. And the boils are so intense, and these are gross, that the magicians are feeling completely powerless. And they plead with Pharaoh, please let them go. So we know even the top layer of leadership are convinced utterly that Moses and God are in control over Pharaoh. Still no change. Hail. And then this week, 3 final plagues. Locusts, which completely strip the land of all vegetation. And by the way, these plagues have to take place over a course of at least a couple of years, so there is a lot of time to acclimate to what needs to happen, and yet no major change has happened among the Egyptian population. And then there's darkness. The Torah says the Egyptians experienced total darkness in their homes for 3 full days and nights. Now I want you to imagine what that's like. Total and utter darkness. Everything goes completely black. Now, your screen may not look black right now, and it's not a mistake that there is nothing there. I want you to imagine Nothing at all. If you really want to be convinced, go into a closet in your home. Cover up the crack at the bottom of the door so that there's absolutely no light entering whatsoever. Stand in there by yourself and see how long it takes before you start to lose your orientation. Doesn't take long at all. There were experiments in the 1960s called experiments of sensory deprivation, where an individual would go into a tank filled with a liquid and lie there, and they would see, what would happen to this person's sense of orientation. And you stay there long enough and you start to go a little crazy. In the same way, the Egyptians, 3 days and nights, this is really, really terrifying for them. Meanwhile, Torah says that in the homes of the Israelites, there was light. They did not experience this plague. So we don't know what happened during that actual 3-day period, but we can be certain that when it ended, the Egyptians had to learn that the Israelites, they had no problem. And the Israelites had to learn that the Egyptians had had this horrible experience that they had been protected from. So this has to be a major, major pivotal moment. Another final chance for the Egyptians to say, let them go. For the Israelites to believe that they will be able to go. Well, the Israelites are convinced because with the final plague, they leave. But the Egyptians, they don't do anything. Nothing at all. So 2 quotes to reflect upon, 2 texts. The first one from the Hasidic Rebbe Israel of Rizhin. He teaches us that there is light, a spark in each of us that comes from the great light above. As if to say, for the Israelites, even when they were terrified, to know that there was light, that there would always be a light within each of them. For us today, to know that even when we are experiencing really difficult, dark times, we're never alone, and there's always a light within. And you can see it. Sometimes you have to close your eyes, and you have to really reflect internally. Where's my light? Where's my spark? It's not isolated. It comes from something I can't see, but I can feel, I know is real. The second text comes from Eshkol Ma'amarim. The worst darkness is when people refuse to see one another. The Egyptians refused to see us, and so they lost their sight. And then the punishment was horrific. Well, for us today, you and I, there are people who are invisible to us. We live our lives, and yes, we have our challenges and our concerns and our issues. But we also have our comforts, and we have our opportunities, and we have our hopes. We have our light. There are people we don't see. We need to change that. So one possibility, in 2 weeks, we have our annual wonderful program, the Mitzvah Mall. And our tzedek team has been working so hard to bring to us 10 remarkable organizations who work so hard to lift our blinders, to enable us to see different groups of people for whom not only can we recognize, but then we can do something to make a difference in their lives. So I urge you to join us for Mitzvah Mall and to see even more clearly. And of course, in all of this, the secret is that when we see and when we act and when we help, the light grows even stronger and brighter within each of us. So in this Shabbat bow, as you have perhaps already or will be in just a couple of moments, lighting Shabbat candles, reflect upon the beauty of the light of Shabbat and how it can help us recover from the darkness of our week, but also enter into a week where we bring light to others. Shabbat Shalom.